Okay, everybody, this is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium for Thursday, July 31st, 2014. I want to talk about a story that a lot of you emailed me right toward the beginning of the month, a story about banks wanting a cyber war council. And I didn't talk about it at the time because I was kind of waiting to see how things would develop, but there's been a couple of interesting articles, one by Bloomberg on July 8th, and then a more recent one just today from a website I'm not really that knowledgeable about with some interesting commentary. So I want to read sections of these articles and do some commentary on what I think, some speculation really, on what I think might be in the background here. The article on Bloomberg was entitled, or pardon me, titled, Big Banks Want Power to Declare Cyber War. And the Bloomberg report states this, quote, Wall Street's biggest trade group has proposed a government industry cyber war council to stave off, pardon me, terrorist attacks that could trigger financial panic by temporarily wiping out bank balances, according to an internal document. The proposal by the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, known as SIFMA, calls for a committee of executives and deputy-level representatives from at least 8 U.S. agencies, including the Treasury Department, the National Security Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security, all led by a senior White House official. And then later on in this article, it states this, quote, Representative Alan Grayson, a Florida Democrat, said today he was concerned that industry members in such a joint group could improperly get involved in a preemptive strike against a person or state planning an assault on the U.S. This, quote, could make the banks part of what would begin to look like a war council, unquote, Grayson said in an email. Quote, Congress needs to keep an eye on what something like this could mean. Then later in the article, it states this, quote, cyber war may lead to a shooting war. For example, Scientific American notes Department of Defense announcements that they intend to view cyber attacks as acts of war suggest a military force nearly itching to flex its muscle in response to a serious computer network-based disruption only as a means of deterrence. Concerns about overreaction and the use of military force in response to digital intrusions often lead to discussions about the difficulty surrounding definitive attribution of these types of attack. If you want to retaliate, let me read that again. I want you to listen very closely to that. Concerns about overreaction and the use of military force in response to digital intrusions often lead to discussions about the difficulty surrounding definitive attribution of these types of attack. If you want to retaliate, how do you know whom to hit? In our exercise, intelligence pointed to Russia, but the evidence wasn't clear-cut. Indeed, let me stop there. What they're suggesting is that this is a perfect vehicle. If you read between the lines from Congressman Grayson's statement and then this statement in Scientific American, if you read between the lines, what they're suggesting is that cyber warfare could become the new type of false flag event. Because if you're a computer hacker, and I don't know that much about it, but it would seem to me rather easy to disguise where ultimately your attack is coming from. It would be very easy to make it look like it's coming from Russia or China or wherever. So in other words, they're raising the prospect of a cyber attack and a actual military response against somebody in terms of a false flag. Now, to go on with this first article that I'm citing, it says, quote, quote, the NSA spying program is unambiguously being used for industrial espionage by spying on large foreign corporations and the biggest financial payment systems such as Visa and SWIFT, which is, of course, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Transfer based in Brussels, Belgium. Indeed, in a slide leaked by Edward Snowden, economic was one of the main justifications for spying. So in other words, now we have a threat for cyber warfare attacks being used to create this council. Now, it was alleged in that article that there is going to be a tight nexus between the Department of Homeland Security in the United States and the National Security Agency and this new Cyber Banking War Council. Now let me read to you an article from another website. The article is titled, "Former NSA Chief Will Work for Wall Street-Backed Cyber War Council." And then the subtitle is, "Keith Alexander Slated to Facilitate Government Industry Effort to Combat Cyber Attacks." Now I want to go to the very end of this article, because it's drawing off the Bloomberg article, but it makes a couple of very interesting comments here that I think might be indicating what the ultimate concern here really is. Toward the end of this article, it says this, quote, "In a letter to CIFMA," that's the organization that I referred to in the Bloomberg article, "the Consumer Banking Association and the Financial Services Roundtable in late June, Congressman Grayson touted the opinion of security expert Bruce Schneier that Alexander," that's General Alexander, the former head of the NSA, "that his proposed fee to the three groups of between $600,000 and $1 million per month is on its face, quote, unreasonable, unquote, unless, quote, he's giving them classified information, unquote." Now, in other words, Grayson, the same fellow that had concerns about congressional oversight for any such body, and we've seen how wonderfully that's worked out with the intelligence agencies. Grayson is alleging that the fee that Alexander is charging for his consultation in establishing this new cyber war council between the government and private finance is too high, unless, of course, it's as a means of giving them confidential classified information coming from within the NSA and the intelligence agencies of the government. Now, in the next paragraph, this article states, quote, "Liz Pierce, a spokeswoman for CIFMA, declined to comment on the contents of the document, but stated that the group is, quote, doing everything possible to help the industry prepare for and defend against cyber attacks," unquote. Now, it sounds to me, folks, like what's going on here is that perhaps there is some indication within the intelligence community, either coming from the NSA, perhaps the CIA, who knows, that they're getting some sort of intelligence indication of a potential cyber attack against the Western financial system. And just where that attack might be coming from is anybody's guess, because as I pointed out in the first article, it's tailor-made for a kind of new type of cyber adaptation of a false flag operation. However, we do have an indicator in other events as to what their concerns might really be, because we've seen just last month the formation, the actual formal announcement of the new BRICS Development Bank by the BRICS nations that had their summit in Fortaleza, Brazil during the World Cup soccer finals last month. And we saw also that Putin and Chancellor Merkel were in attendance, and that they were obviously conferring with each other. And I suspect, as I've been arguing all along, and as has been indicated recently with pronouncements from the BRICS nations, that they are also very serious in their knowledge that they're going to have to establish their own independent mechanisms of international financial clearing. And we've seen Germany's concerns now about the NSA spying on their country, on their corporations, on the chancellor, ratcheted up to the point that the German Bundesnachrichtendienst has ordered its procurement to be curtailed when dealing with American and other Western companies for procuring their computer hardware. So what's going on here? I suspect the background of all of this is the BRICS Bank and the fear that this could be a means of launching a platform of launching cyber attacks against the Western-based systems based around Visa, SWIFT, chips, and other things like that for international financial clearing, and that there might be some intelligence at work. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to say that I don't think that there's dangers. I think the dangers are huge, given the fascist tendencies that we've seen emerging in the West of the fusions of large corporations and the government. I think there's huge danger in it. But I think most analysts out there are concentrating on that. I wanted to concentrate on this idea that maybe they're looking at some intelligence, or perhaps even in their strategic analysis and threat assessments, that they're looking at something that may be coming down the pike, not necessarily as a short-term threat, but maybe one in the more mid to long-term threat, and that they're trying to put all the steps into place to protect against that. That's one possibility, and the other possibility, as I suggested, citing Congressman Grayson, who has certainly been a thorn in the financial wheelings and dealings of the high and mighty in this country. Congressman Grayson is alluding to the possibility of false flag operations using these new capabilities. So, folks, this is a really important story. It's one to watch. I think it's one to watch in conjunction with the BRICS nations and what they are now going to be saying. And this, I think, is going to be a huge clue. What they're going to be saying in terms of cyber attacks, cyber warfare on international financial clearing and institutions that do international financial clearing. What are they going to be saying about this in the future, and what sort of measures are they going to be proposing in terms of the protection of international financial clearing? Now, obviously, this article is focused on domestic cyber attacks, but I do think these two articles, I should say, are focused on domestic financial attacks. But I think that there's an international context here that we have to watch and follow very carefully as well. So they might be preparing for some sort of false flag of a cyber nature in the financial area. They might be having intelligence. This is a really huge, important story, folks. And I want to thank all of you who sent me some of these articles over the last month dealing with this issue. And it's not that I haven't wanted to comment, but once Congressman Grayson weighed into this, and we saw and see now General Alexander more or less firming up a relationship with this council. This is very newsworthy stuff, and I hope you'll all pay very, very close attention to it. That's it for today's news and views, folks. I'll see you on the flip side, and God bless everybody.